We'll call this meeting of the Plan Commission for August 4, 2020 to order. And please turn off your cell phones so that they don't interrupt things. And those who have not been to a meeting before, what we do is we introduce the item and staff presents the staff report. And then the Plan Commission has technical questions for them. And then after that, we open it up to public comment. And we want your views. And when public comment is finished, it come back to the commission for discussion and a vote. Okay, we'll call the roll.
Sorry, multitasking.
Wake up, Mark. No.
Koulibaly. Davy.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Groth. Kiefer.
Here.
Mitchell.
Here.
Perry.
Here.
Stengel. Marshall.
Here.
Hintz.
Present.
Prop.
Here.
8 present.
Okay, you have the July 21 minutes. What's your pleasure?
Move to accept them as written.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Item 1 is residential design standard variance for window closure at 1936 Oregon Street. And site inspections, anybody? I had one. Okay, a few site
Around the corner.
inspections.
John.
And the chair will accept the staff report as part of the record. Go ahead.
So I'm going to jump in quick for Brandon here. Staff was originally recommended out of this variance. Brandon and the applicant have just been talking. They have an alternative plan that will meet code and no longer need a design standards variance. So we're going to ask that they withdraw their request because it's no longer needed. So I just want them to come up and make sure they understand that they can withdraw their request based on their most recent proposal that they've been working on with Brandon.
Okay, great.
Yes, we withdraw the request. We've changed it so now it meets code, and actually we're enlarging the windows.
So overall,
Be larger than what is there now.
Super.
Okay, so do we need any more detail, Mark, or just that the windows will be bigger than they are now and?
so we'll just have a motion to withdraw and then and we can vote on it.
So moved. Second.
All right. Voting first. Perry.
Aye.
Marshall.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Davy.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
All right. Item has been withdrawn. Thank you. Just work directly with
easy.
Brandon tomorrow, and we'll get you your permit right away.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This is the way we like to see things resolved.
Yeah.
Excellent. Do that for everything.
Make a motion to withdraw the next one. Oh, that's the third one.
Okay, we'll go on to item 2. Public hearing, conditional use permit request for an outdoor storage area and parking at 3135 Oregon for Oshkosh Corporation. Were there any site inspections?
And it's
No.
tough to get out there right now.
Yeah, I can't get
The
there.
chair will accept the staff report as part of the record. And go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you. So, Mark, I don't know if you have to advance through because working here.
Try now.
Okay. Oh, thanks. So we'll go through this really quick here. Yeah, so item 2 is a conditional use permit request for an outdoor storage expansion and parking expansion at 3135 Oregon Street. And so this is just an applicable code reference here. I just want to call into attention the fact that we have parking maximums for non-residential sites, well, for all sites actually, but in this case, non-residential use that's in question. And anything that would go more than 125% of the minimum required spaces would have to have a CUP. Here's the subject site here. You can see it at West Waukah and Oregon Street there. It is owned by Oshkosh Corporation. And the subject site is on the, I think, the northeast corner of the Aviation Industrial Park. So it is part of an industrial park. There's a lot of industrial around it. There are a few single-family properties you can see to the east there. But the property in question and the property immediately to the west and the south, those are both owned by Oshkosh Corporation. They function as one overall complex. So you can see an aerial of the subject site here in blue there, and you can see just to the west, obviously, a lot of vehicle storage that takes place on the property immediately west of it, and then the office building, the existing parking and storage area on the subject site, and you can see how it is accessed from West Waukah Avenue and also accessed from Oregon Street. So there is about a 13,000 square foot office building, and then there are associated parking spaces and storage there. The office building includes a pretty fair-sized conference room that does attract a lot of clients. Their on-site traffic expands and increases when that room is in use. And they use the storage space, I think, as an area to display their products, their vehicles for their clients when they're there. So they are looking to expand that. And this came before staff before. It came to staff last year as a CUP request to expand this parking and storage area. They withdrew it because they did not have all of their plans finalized. So they are coming back to us now formally. So you can see the proposed plan here. They are looking to add about 6,300 square feet of gravel storage area. And you can see that kind of where the red cursor is there, pointer there. And then they're also adding or proposing to add 37 spaces of surface parking there just to the east of that storage expansion. They would remove 3 parking spaces in the existing parking area, but then they are going to reconfigure a small portion of that area, so they will have a net increase of 40 spaces. They are adding approximately 20,360 square feet of impervious surface area to the site, so it is a noteworthy amount of impervious surface area. Despite the fact that they're adding impervious surface area, they do still stay under the industrial covenant maximum of 60% and the zoning maximum of 70% for the heavy industrial zone parcel in question. So they are okay on impervious surface area. As far as traffic patterns, those will not change, except that they will remove a few stalls, as you can see, to get into that new parking area there. Their access drives will stay the same. As far as screening, they do, as you know, have to enclose that storage area with a solid 8-foot tall fence. What they proposed, I don't have an image up here, but it does not meet code at this point. The solid section of the fence stops below the 8-foot mark. So they are going to have to resubmit a code compliant fencing detail. That's one concern that we have. And as I mentioned, the reason that they're adding so many parking spaces is really to accommodate the increased traffic when that conference room is in session. They say that adding those spaces to the site will mitigate any parking on the grass or in other non-designated parking areas. Moving on to landscaping here, they are code compliant as they are what they're proposing now, except for yard landscaping. You can see in red there the table from your staff report that we put in the presentation. They have to provide points for the gravel storage expansion. For every 1,000 square feet of building or storage expansion, they have to account for that with yard landscaping. They are proposing paved area landscaping and street frontage landscaping, and they're okay. They meet code there, just not with yard landscaping yet. So they are going to have to submit a revised landscaping plan that accounts for the yard points that they need to add. Moving on to photometrics here. And their lighting plan for the parking area actually meets code, and from what I could tell, it meets code in all places except for that red area there. you can see outlined at the access to that parking area, they are, one, they're not showing the values for a lot of that. And then the values between the access drive and the existing parking edge there, those I think are below the minimum code requirements. So they are going to have to submit a revised photometric plan just showing all of the information and that it is code compliant. Obviously we can't grant any base standards because it is a CUP. Before I get into the recommendation, just want to mention for signage, building facades, no changes are proposed, so we have nothing to worry about there at this point. And for stormwater management, they are going to have to do a full stormwater review, as far as I remember, because they are adding a good amount of impervious surface to the site. So that will be required as part of the site plan review process. And with that, we are supportive of the CUP request for this outdoor storage area and parking expansion, as long as they meet these conditions. You know, the 8-foot tall solid fencing, submitting revised details for that. Obviously, a CUP to allow for the total of 88 parking spaces in excess of the 125% minimum parking count. The revised landscaping plan would have to be submitted with code compliant points and species for yard landscaping in particular. And then the revised code compliant photometric plan. And that's all I have on that one.
Okay, technical questions, Plan Commission? Phil or Justin, any technical questions? No? I have one. I was a bit surprised that gravel is permitted for this, the storage.
It is still for outdoor storage. And Mark, I don't know if you want to weigh in too, but you know, the idea that it is just a storage area and not a surface parking lot that is publicly used, you know, that way we don't require it to meet the same standards that we would for a publicly accessible lot.
Correct. Storage is always been permitted to be a gravel base and does not have to be paved. You think a lot of your industrial uses and the things they're storing on, whether it
Okay.
be vehicles or large piping or stuff, it's more conducive to being stored on gravel than paving it and beating that pavement
Okay.
up.
It's also more
Well, you're
pervious.
What?
It's more pervious. Is
It's
it
more
different?
pervious.
Yes.
For stormwater calculation purposes, it is still constitutes impervious surface and has
Okay.
to be accounted for in stormwater management plans.
Okay. Any other technical?
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. There's a waterway along the west border, is that correct?
I'm just going back there here.
The unnamed creek on the map.
Yeah, I believe there is some sort of wetland or water featured on the western edge of the site.
And does this impact that zone?
None of the improvements are proposed in that location. Again, they have not submitted finalized stormwater plans. So our public works folks, when those are submitted, will have to review to make sure we're not having any issues with what's out there.
Sure. Second question then, it appears as though this whole area is already well enclosed by trees, and it looked from Oregon that the tree row was very full and healthy. Are there ever scenarios in which we don't require content if it's largely not visible anyways?
For outdoor storage, no, it is a straight code requirement. As a CUP, if they wanted to go through a plan development request and ask for modification of it, they could, but outdoor storage does carry a straight 8-foot solid fencing requirement with it.
Do you know, they're planning to leave those trees there along Oregon?
Yep,
Yes, so they're actually, if Stephen, you could go to their landscape plan.
Oh, yeah,
Or
let's-
actually go, you can see those trees are
on
the
the-
same trees that show up in the aerial for their perimeter landscaping. So it looks like their intent is to leave those large mature trees. They actually get additional points for those trees by leaving them. And then the improvements will kind of be fit behind those and the storage area for the parking lot.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we open the public hearing and request a statement from the applicant, and the applicant is not here, is that correct?
Does not look like we have the applicant here today.
Okay. Applicant is not here. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item? No? Back to the commission. We close the public hearing. And we need a motion
Motion to adopt findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
and a second.
Second.
Was that
Okay.
Mr. Perry? Couldn't hear
Discussion.
who it was.
Any discussion? Seeing none, then we'll call the roll.
Perry,
Aye.
Marshall,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Davy,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Carries 8-0.
Okay, next item is number 4, public hearing.
First, we do need to officially take action on number 3.
Oh, all right.
So notices were sent out that we were going to have this meeting, so we do need to take some sort of formal action. Staff, since that initial filing, been continuing to work with them on a couple of the outstanding items. Felt it was in the best interest to have this laid over, talking through with the applicant. They agreed, but we had already made the notice, so we do have to be here
Oh, okay.
today. So we just asked for a motion to lay it over. As you can see, it looks like no one from the public
Okay.
came to
There it
speak on
is.
this one.
So a motion to lay over, please.
So moved.
Second.
Don? Motion and a second, discussion, call the roll. Thank you.
So we'll lay this over then just to the next meeting.
Okay,
Plan Commission's. Perry,
Aye.
Marshall,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Davy,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop.
aye.
Okay, carried 8-0 to lay over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll go on to another public hearing, specific implementation plan amendment and conditional use permit for retail building trade dress, 1650 to 1660 Oshkosh Avenue. And were there any site inspections? The chair will accept the staff report as part of the record, and go ahead.
Thank you.
staff.
So the subject site is located on Oshkosh Avenue. It is zoned corporate business park. They planned a development overlay. So here's the aerial view. It is located to the west of Mary Jewel Park and to the east of what is now the Casey's General Store site. In 2019, there was an SIP approved for the site to include a 3-story retail building, and the SIP also included an office building on the site to the north. So here's their site plan, which includes a few minor revisions. All the changes they're proposing are, they meet the zoning ordinance standards, and there's no increase in impervious surface. They're also showing a minor change in the landscape plan. On the north side of the building, they are moving some of the building foundation shrubs to the east and the west sides to accommodate a bike rack near that entrance. So this request is for an SIP amendment and a conditional use permit for trade dress. So their building facades will include trade dress. It also includes signage for both Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins. So the SIP approval required that they meet the corporate business park standard of 15% maximum wall signage area per facade and maximum of 1 square foot per linear foot of building frontage per facade. As you can see here on the north and south facades, the Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins wall signage does eat up a large portion of their allowed 101 square feet of signage, which is the linear footage. And their plans do show the signage for the future tenant to exceed what the remainder that's left for allowable signage. So we did want to make a note that they will be held to the 1 square foot per linear foot for wall signage. So the future tenant will need to meet that standard. And they are proposing trade dress, which includes some class 3 materials, which will be colored metal banding, fiber cement panels, fiber cement siding. So the trade dress does require a conditional use permit, as was required in the corporate business park. So all facades still do meet the 75% class 1 material requirement. However, we did want to note that individual storefront areas do not meet the 75% class 1 material requirement. In particular, the Dunkin' Donuts south facade is about 53% class 1 only. And then the Dunkin' Donuts east facade has 2 wall sections of 52 to 53% class 1 material. So again, just portions of those facades are not meeting the 75%, but the overall facades do meet the 75%. So we wanted to make that note as those portions, those wall portions, are not consistent with the intent of the corporate business park standards, which is to provide a balanced appearance. They're also requesting a BSM for reduced window and door area on the street-facing facade, which is the south facade, as they're adding parapets to screen the rooftop HVAC units. However, staff is recommending denial of that BSM, as we would recommend that they just increase the door and window area to accommodate that increase in wall area. So staff is supportive of the SIP amendment and conditional use permit request for trade dress, with conditions that the window and doors or other openings shall comprise at least 40% of the area on the street-facing south facade, and the overall wall sign area may not exceed 1 square foot per linear foot of building frontage on any facade.
So just add a couple of comments on what Brandon said, or Brandon, excuse me, Brian. Staff wanted to highlight a couple of things we see on this plan. From a code perspective, it's code compliant. Yes, they asked for that 40% window reduction. We're saying no, should go to 40%. That's the intent of the code. But there's really 2 items here that we just want to bring to your attention because they may be code compliant. They also are a little bit of concern because it doesn't necessarily meet the intent of how the code was written. So we have that situation where letter of the law and intent, staff's recommend approval because technically it meets all the standards we put in place, which are still pretty lofty standards. We just wanted to make sure you're aware of them. The first is the signage issue. It's a little disproportionate how much signage they're eating up of what that building wall is allowed. Now, technically that's an issue the owner will have to work through in the future as he gets additional tenants and what's left for them. Staff just wants to be upfront and saying, we are not going to support that 3rd or 4th tenant coming in and saying, well, we need more signage because they took most of what's allowed, so now we need more. Staff just wanted to out front. We will not support that request. 101 feet is sufficient. We feel they should be held to that. But today's presentation, they do meet the code. Same thing with the building facade. Technically, we said 75% class 1 for the entire building. They meet that 75% class 1 for the entire building, but it's a little disproportional again. The Dunkin' Donuts and the Raskin Robbins with some of their trade dress requests, those individual units aren't 75%, but the whole building is. So again, we do recommend approval because they meet the code, but we wanted to make sure Plan Commission was at least aware of that distinction.
Okay, technical questions. Tom?
I noticed in the architect's letter, it does indicate that the things that they're asking for is simply going to go over things that we require.
So like their
So that
trade,
there's a potential of switching it back should the business move out.
yeah, so like the trade dress elements, some of these are being installed over the brick. So there is still that brick base underneath. I guess I would want to clarify, I think the architect is here, correct? This is the one that I'm not, I think that's the intent of this. We can ask them to make sure the fiber cement stuff is the same way, but we know this brick banding, or this banding here would be installed over the brick.
Yeah, we need that clarification because it says the material will be applied over brick. But it also says where cost, for construction and cost, find applicable for possible future removal. The issue that I have is while it's one building, in the future it could be sold off essentially as business condos, and then we would have one of those condos, however many there would be, that would be non-compliant for a future use.
Okay. Any other technical questions?
I don't know that this falls under technical, but are Dunkin' and Baskin-Robbins the same corporation?
I'll defer that to the applicant because I don't know.
Okay, I'll wait.
Well, and I have, it might be addressed somewhere in the staff report. Which building is this? This is not the drive-through.
Yes, Duncan is the drive-through on.
Dunkin' is the drive-through.
Can you go back to the site plan for me?
Clicker's not working here.
Try now.
Okay, yep, drive-throughs on the east side.
Yep, go all the way back for me to
Okay.
the site plan.
I think this one.
Yeah, go back to the main, yeah, that
So
one.
that's
So
southeast.
that's this, kind of this unit is Duncan, and this unit is Baskin Robbins. So it's this portion
Oh, okay.
of the development that we're looking at. This is the building in general that we're looking at.
Okay. So Duncan is the drive-through and Baskin Robbins is
Kind of
not.
that next tenant over.
Next tenant over. Okay.
Can we go back to the north and south?
Yes.
Why is Duncan on the right on both sides?
I'll clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
You see,
May also answer your first question.
the exterior north, is this it goes all the way through to the north side of the building? This says
Correct.
north.
This is
I
the
get
n-
the south.
Yep, go back to the,
This is north and where's east?
so that image doesn't have east, it has this elevation on, this is the top elevation you're looking at. This is the bottom elevation you're looking at. And then, can you go to the east?
Okay. East is the drive-through.
So this is the east.
Here we are. Okay.
So the far right side of the building, obviously the far left side of the building.
And the east side is what is facing Oshkosh Ave.
East side is what you'd see traveling
the park.
west on Oshkosh Ave.
South is facing Oshkosh.
Where's the baseball?
South faces Oshkosh Ave. East would be, I guess, if you were standing in Mary Jewel Park,
Okay,
that
thank
is
you.
the
Yeah,
facade you would
right.
see.
Okay.
Obviously,
Sorry.
there's landscaping and a drive-through between those, but that is the facade that would face directly at Mary Jewel Park.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough to see it unless you come right on top of it, in my opinion, but it's there.
Yeah. Okay. Any more technical questions? Well, then we'll open the public hearing and request a statement from the applicant. Is there an applicant?
Yep. Right up here.
Name and address, please.
Mario Valentini, MRV Architects, 5105 Tollview Drive in Rolling Meadows, Illinois.
Okay.
First, I'd like to say we appreciate the opportunity to come in front of the commission and talk about these requests that we're making. I think I'll just start by answering a few questions. First of all, the tenant space is a rectangular space. Both brands occupy the same rectangular space. When you walk into this restaurant, there's no divider between Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins. It's all the same frontline equipment. You walk up, and you go to the register, and you look at a menu board, and you say, I want this from Dunkin' Donuts, and next to it, you see all the same menu, you see available menu offerings for Baskin Robbins. So you can go to one register and say, I want something from Dunkin' Donuts, and I also want ice cream. So it's all a cohesive space. There's no division, which is why when you're looking at the elevations, there's really no separation or need to separate, hey, I'm gonna have Baskin Robbins only on one side, because there's no separate door. It's all the same entrance. To answer the other question, the parent company to Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' Donuts is a company called Dunkin' Brands. Dunkin' Brands they franchise all of their locations. T-Mart, who is the applicant in this case, is the franchisee. They own and operate, I want to say close to 50 stores throughout, and that's just Dunkin' Donuts and some Baskin Robbins throughout Wisconsin. They're expanding a little bit now into Michigan, but they're operators, they're good operators, and they know what they're doing, so this isn't their first go-around. So in this situation, what we're trying to do here is just give this building just a little bit of identification to this end cap user, right? And by doing so, we're applying the material onto what was the proposed building. So the building would go up as if Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins were not going in there. Then these materials would be applied onto that building with the thought that if for whatever reason, let's say 20 years down the road, the Dunkin' Donuts and the Baskin Robbins were to no longer have a lease for that space, then they could vacate the space, and on their lease agreement, they're required to remove those materials.
Oh, okay.
So, well, either they're required to, I shouldn't say per the lease agreement, but ultimately what would happen is either the landlord or Dunkin' Donuts could remove that material, right? So that the next tenant could come in and they wouldn't look like a Dunkin' Donuts or a Baskin Robbins, right, from the exterior. So things that become specific to Dunkin' Donuts is like the orange band, for example, right? If you had somebody else who the orange band doesn't fit with the style or decor of their location, then they can take that orange band off or paint it or whatever the case is. So they really are just trying to distinguish themselves a little bit with a couple of few items of identification that would look similar to what you might see in a freestanding Dunkin' Donuts. The fiber cement panels, that's what that does. Gives that little bit of identification where you'd say, oh, I see those items elsewhere in other locations of Dunkin' Donuts on, say, their freestanding buildings. Or maybe another end cap that's built somewhere else, and they have the same items of identification, right? So it just gives a little bit of flavor to, no pun intended, flavor of what's
Flavor of the day.
what the brands represent. And so I think that is covering what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, how the building can go back to what it needs to be without interrupting the look of the rest of the building, okay? So I think the only thing left to address is signage. And I understand staff's report, I understand their comments, and we understand the concern about, hey, we've got a landlord here who, to their point, maybe doesn't have the tenants already filled out for the rest of those spaces. And they don't want to have an issue later on where they have a tenant who would come in, maybe a major, corporate, national brand, and they say, well, wait a second, we want our piece of this also, right? So we recognize that, and we don't want to put the landlord in a position where, he's going to have issues with his future tenants. That being said, we do fall under a situation which is good and bad. We have the opportunity to have two major brands in one location that can act cohesively in one space without requiring, a large amount of additional square footage or leasable space. So that's a good thing, but then we fall under the same problem, is that we want to be able to have some semblance of branding and signage on the building for both, right? I don't necessarily know what the commissioner's thoughts are on allowing our request. And real quick, the specific changes. So you see where the DD and the Baskin Robbins, they have a backdrop, right? That kind of it's the fiber cement board. It's the light colored fiber cement board, right? So that gives us the ability to just kind of pop those areas, and it helps the signage pop a little bit so that it's not on a kind of a muted background that kind of absorbs that. If you put it on the brick, it just doesn't pop as much. So we're trying to accomplish that thing. So in speaking with the ownership and speaking with the corporate entities, we could look at reducing. I think ultimately what happens is when you look at this, the Dunkin' Donuts by the code is, it meets the 1 square foot per linear foot of building, right? The actual, if we could go to the other elevation, see, because actually the east elevation I think is compliant. It's the north and south elevations that are not compliant. If the Baskin Robbins signage wasn't there, the Dunkin' Donuts sign by itself wouldn't have an issue. It would meet the requirement based on the the length of the leasable space. It meets it without a problem. It's the addition of the Baskin Robbins sign that kicks us out altogether. Personally, in speaking with the franchisee and the brand, they'd like to see the Baskin-Robbins signage as shown. However, we could offer a reduction of that signage. The logo, just like you saw on the drive-through side, where the Dunkin' can become DD, the Baskin-Robbins can also become just the BR, okay? And that would be the left portion of that logo, right? So we have the opportunity to reduce that a little bit if we can incorporate that. And then my suggestion would be that in the ordinance that we're requesting, that the additional signage be only allowed for the business of Baskin-Robbins and not an approval to the shopping center, so that the additional square footage doesn't become something that could be utilized by Dunkin'. Say Baskin were to be removed for whatever reason, right? And then it's a Dunkin' only. That Dunkin' can't come back and request to use that additional square footage that Baskin was given, right? Or if Dunkin' and Baskin were to be, removed after 20 years or whatever the case is, that the next tenant or any adjacent tenants, that they don't get to use that square footage. So it's literally only for the Baskin-Robbins. And as that portion of the business were to leave, then so would the allowance for that additional square footage. So if that is something that is can be up for discussion, we'd like to request that as a possibility.
Mark, how many units are in there?
The way they're showing it presently, it looks like 3 overall units. So essentially 33, 34 with 101 feet of frontage, about 34-ish square feet of signage per unit space, if we're calling it 3 units. Would be typical how the code would divide it up.
Do we have the ability to do what he's requesting?
This is a plan development, so you have quite a bit of flexibility. From the staff's opinion, I would advise against it.
Okay.
If you want to entertain them reducing that to just the BB, maybe it goes from 22.6 square feet to 10 square feet. That's going to up the allowance for the rest of the building, from 43 to 53, 55. Staff's primary concern here is 101 feet and 101 square feet of signage.
And that was my point I was going to get to, because it seems like then we would be doing the landlord's job, because we approve X amount of for the building, and it's the landlord who has to work with the tenants who come in there and say, this is what you've got, this is what we have, this is all we can do. And I'm thinking that, and that was why I wanted to ask the first question leading into that, because like I said, I think that's the landlord's job to take care of who has how much signage out of percentages of what's available. And if they want to give,
if I could, the reason why we're coming up with the numbers the way we are is because we're basing it on the fact that the width of the space occupied by Dunkin' and Baskin is 36 wide. So that 36 width would give 36 square feet. The Dunkin' Donuts, as shown, is 35, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to the point of what we would be asking, ultimately what we would be asking for is the BR by itself is 9.16 square feet. So technically we would be, if it were to be reduced, and by the way, the reduction of the Baskin-Robbins signage, the reduction of that also reduces the background, which would then get us back to the percentage that you're looking for the class material reduction. So again, that assists. So that linear rectangle that now is the backdrop of Baskin-Robbins pretty much goes down to a square, for the lack of a better, without a visual. That's what it basically comes out to.
so basically what you're saying is Dunkin's eating up all the space we're trying to fit in Baskin-Robbins as best we can. Pretty much.
Well, so what we're doing is, what we're trying to accomplish is yes, Dunkin', let's not,
Yeah.
Dunkin' is the major brand of the two, right? And what it is. But that being said, we're trying to use standardized signage. We're trying to use signage that is known, right? The size of the signage, there are studies that are done that, the distance away from the street, there's a certain amount of height that you want with the lettering and so on and so forth. So that's why when we reduce and take away the words Baskin-Robbins, that's where we would change things, right? Because
Right.
then the BR becomes the identifying piece of that signage, and it's easier to read. It's still easy to read from the street, as opposed to reducing both of them to a point at which, not that it's not legible, but it's not ideal for what the brand is looking for.
So, I'm confused, which is not unusual. I don't care if you reduce your Baskin-Robbins to BR, if that's what you want to do. Does that reduces the total linear feet of sign? Does that allow adequate sign then for this other building? That's what we're concerned about.
What that does is, in reducing the Baskin-Robbins signage to just the BR, still puts us over by 8 to 9 square feet.
So you're shorting whoever would come in as tenants by 8 or 9 feet. Their sign has to be that much smaller than
Right.
Without-
What I'm saying is, we would like to not approach it that way. We'd like to basically request that BR stand alone as an item that doesn't fall against the restrictions for the landlord.
So essentially, they're requesting a base standard modification for the overall building signage to go up from the 101 allowed to essentially call it 111. They're asking for 10 more square feet than they'd really be allowed.
I appreciate the dilemma that's caused by this, and I know that there's a lot of commingling of like businesses or like corporate all over the place. You see it with gas stations, you see it everywhere. And it does kind of also go back to, does the orange stripe constitute part of the sign because it's part of the brand? It's a whole Buffalo Wild Wings thing. But ultimately, I view this as being Mr. Hoopman and his partner's problem, where if they sign a deal that has the sign space that they have, then it's Mr. Hoopman and his partner's issue to negotiate the other tenant spaces and saying, hey, there's a limitation to your signage here. It may help him, it may hurt him, but that's his ultimate business, in my opinion.
And we made it known that we're not gonna allow, or staff's not gonna recommend approval of a variance to go
Right.
above that, so.
right.
something
Okay,
we'll put down.
Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I think that goes beyond our role here. I'm looking at the numbers, and they meet the Class 1 materials. Even if our intent was that we wanted to treat these as 3 different buildings, that's not what we did. I think we have to go by the letter of it, and that's why the city staff had to make that recommendation. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's our issue. I think that's a landlord issue, and we don't need to be doing their job for them. But I do have a question for the applicant. How much of a problem would it be to get the street-facing ground floor south facade up to 41% from 38%? I mean, is that a big deal?
Is that the glass?
Correct. That's the one place I see, below.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
Okay.
Again, we can work with it's their building, right, to accomplish what we need to accomplish, so I think we could do that.
Okay.
And really quick, just kind of going back to the tenant versus landlord and that whole discussion. I think ultimately what we're trying to get at is, by lease, right, the landlord could come back and say, to the point of, hey, you being the landlord, go figure this out with your tenant, right? And then legally, he could just come back and say, well, you have a document here, right, which is your lease, that says you're only gonna get, you know, X amount of signage. And then we're basically, what we're doing is we're asking, right, directly to this commission to say, hey, instead of us having to go back and you know, worry about the landlord basically dropping the hammer and saying, no, we're not going to give it to you because we don't know what the other tenants are going to do. This puts that whole discussion out of place, but again, I understand what the thoughts are.
Well, it's a BSM, a whole separate issue anyway.
Okay.
This body would have the ability to add a BSM if they so approve. Yeah. BSMs are done as conditions. You could add a baseline modification if you wanted to reduce it. One question I have for the applicant, and this might be without getting to.
Dishwasher doesn't fall out, but it doesn't really yet.
Alan, can you mute yourself possibly?
Yep. Exactly. Okay. Well, I just hadn't heard from tenants, and I hadn't heard from you, so I wanted to know. So,
Insider trading going on right
I
now.
know. Like, where's my WebEx?
Bunch of stuff. Very good.
I guess since you're up there,
Sounds good.
so I guess I'm trying to understand exactly what you're requesting. So the idea would be requesting a base stair modification to increase the allowable signage on the total building so that you
But
can
only-
have, okay, go ahead.
But only for the use of the Baskin-Robbins signage. See what I'm saying? We're not asking that the entire building get the additional square footage. We're just asking that and maybe the additional square footage only be utilized for the signage as a part of this presentation.
But I guess I'll go back to city staff, but there's no,
You're doing it.
they're not
for-
violating any code here.
Right now, because it's the only signage on the building, they're not violating anything. Chances are that second tenant space goes up, they put up a sign. Again, probably code compliant. It's that third tenant where we could get into issues. All of a sudden, they've eaten up 90, there's 10 left. Now, you could choose to add a baseline modification that essentially says, we're gonna allow 101 square feet of overall signage on that building, with specifically 10 feet, 9 point whatever, being allowed for this Baskin-Robbins sign. Without getting too many nuances of the code, how were these sign calculations done? Are those pin-mounted letters? Are they a raceway channel with letters mounted to it?
They are not. There were details provided in the packet, and I have one of them here. So what happens is it's basically individual letters mounted to the face, and each letter, and basically, and even like the
I see
the
that.
apostrophe of the Duncan, right? That gets an individual electric feed. It's an LED fixture.
They're individual pin-mounted letters.
Well, pin-mounted would still put it off the face of the building. It's.
They're individual mounted
Yes,
letters.
they're individually mounted letters,
Okay,
correct.
so one thing to discuss here is that sign, I think you call it out at, I gotta change screens, I'm sorry. 34.58 by drawing a box around it.
Yeah.
Our code's not gonna calculate that at 35.8, it's actually less than that. When you have individually mounted letters, your sign calculation is based on a square around each letter. So you look at like the apostrophe area, you know, right now this is all calculated in there, and technically a lot of this white space. So you might, between the BB, those are individually mounted, and these are individually mounted, we might actually be closer to code compliance than we realize here.
Okay.
And again, that's with the modification, right? The original submittal and the original request was to have the BR and the words Baskin-Robbins, right? So again, I'm kind of putting something out there before it, you know, if I don't say something, this gets voted on and the whole thing is rejected. If I offer something that is a potential, you know, it's just a little bit of leeway, then the BR, you know, gets changed a little bit, but it's still a bit larger than what is allowed. I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, yeah, we're trying to do some of the work for the landlord so that he doesn't have an issue later on with any tenants that say, I'm off by 5 square feet.
Yeah.
Or, whatever the case.
Okay. Mike, you had a comment?
John was on
Oh, John
first.
did?
Mark, where are we sitting then with those letters if we're recalculating?
I'd have to
Because
be able to have some
Because
time
it
to
kind of
measure
matters,
them out.
because as the one person who's actually installed signs on buildings like this, I was gonna suggest, I mean, you say that there isn't, when you say there isn't room for this, I mean, you could do a simple, hold on, how wide is that sign right now with the Dunkin', what are we looking at? I
think
can't
it's
find it,
actually
I
on that
can't find
sheet.
it on my sheet, that's why and my glasses are fogging up from this, so. I'm trying, anyway, you could do if there was a reduction in size of 3 inches all the way across, all of a sudden you're picking up a couple feet, I mean, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, potentially.
And that's how you make signs fit on buildings like this, where you have to fit them into a certain code. I know, because all over the state, all the state codes, every city is extremely different. So I don't know, are we dealing with a fixed size letter that they refuse, that they only have one size that they make? Or they couldn't actually come down like, 3 or 4 inches on the sign. It's still gonna be plenty visible, but you're gonna save yourself X amount of feet, because, I mean, there are ways around this. Especially someone who has installed signs.
We completely understand. We completely understand that, and you have to remember this presentation is more about everything.
Right.
I know it's come down to the one contentious item, which is the signage, but we didn't mean it to be that way, right? We understand that, yes, custom signs can be made, which reduce even the Dunkin' Donuts to maybe allow for the BR or the Baskin Robbins. I mean, we understand that, we get that. Yes, we are first starting with what is the, if you know signs, you know them very well, right? When national brands make signs, they make them, let's call it small, medium, large, right? Small, medium, large are on a jig somewhere. Actually, Everbright is in Wisconsin, so they're made in Wisconsin. And that jig pops out signs, right, regularly, right? As soon as you take that and you, right, now you're like, expensive. And again, we're not talking about that as the
And
issue.
the whole reason we're going back and forth on this is because we're trying to not run into an issue when the future tenants come in. Because we have X amount to work with, and we're trying to make everything fit.
Understood. No, and again, I didn't
Okay.
want to,
Yeah.
want this to.
Let's go on to some more comments here.
Yeah,
Mike.
I guess I don't find this to be a contentious issue at all. I mean, the issue will be when that third tenant has an issue where they're actually violating code, then it's up to them to come back. So I'm of the point of view of the applicant, you should just put up the smaller sign if we're worried about it. I mean, you don't need us to tell you have to do that because of some theoretical third tenant that we don't know exists yet.
Right.
It's just, I think we're overthinking this.
And we already found more square footage
Yeah.
today just by the way the letters are going up, so.
And the third tenant their branding may be a tiny little sign.
What, no.
Oh.
Right, but the point being though is that if we were to stick with the signage as shown in the original application, right, then there is a big difference, right? Because the BR itself becomes almost 23 square feet over, right? And you're right, we could, the landlord could come back and say, oh, we'll put it on and then we'll figure out what happens down the line. We don't know that yet because that just hasn't presented itself. So it's better to just, while we're putting the whole presentation together, ask for what we know to be something that won't become an issue down the line ever. That's all.
I guess where I struggle, and this is more for city staff than as applicant, I don't mean to keep pressing on you, but I guess why is that our issue to tell an applicant, or request an applicant to make a base standard modification on something that's not inconsistent with our requirements because of some theoretical problem that might occur someday? I mean, I think it's just bad practice for us to be asking individuals to go above and beyond what we require.
And that's
in general.
exactly where we're at. We want to bring it up so you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's as much to make sure planning commission is aware of it as the owner and the applicant. We just want to be upfront and say, what you're doing is allowed. You don't have to change it. Just be aware that third tenant down the line, it could be an issue. We don't necessarily need to do a base standard modification or anything.
Right.
It's just bringing it to light to make sure 2 years from down the line, 6 months from down the line, when that comes in, we don't want the owner to say, whoa, what do you mean?
I think, go ahead, you had something new to add, John, otherwise.
No, I'm good.
We're being more informal here than we usually are, but this is good because we're getting feedback. So, any more questions for the applicant? I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience that wants to speak on this? Seeing none, then you have an opportunity for one last closing statement if you want to make one.
Okay. Would you like me to do that now?
Yeah, if you want to.
So again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to not only bring, basically bring our whole presentation here, the discussion about the materials. Obviously our client is anxious to be able to become a good, kind of help to the community, good business, and obviously the brands, national brands, bringing them here is great for them also, and they look forward to being here. That being said, we're going to be able to get a little bit closer to what we're showing on this drawing, but ultimately it's something that would not only help the center but also help the businesses for their identification. And again, appreciate that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. Well, back to the commission. We need a motion.
Motion to adopt findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Motion and a second from John. Okay, now discussion on the motion, and you've got something you want to say? No?
Nope.
Discussion on the motion. Maya?
This is more a quick question for Mark. So the second condition, where the overall wall sign may not exceed 1 square feet per linear foot of building frontage on any facade, how does that compare to what is in?
That is the code.
So why-
Again, it's just making sure it's on the record, it's known once again, it's that making sure the owner of this property knows what's going on, and just reinforcing that staff will not support changing that.
And that it's helpful to staff too, when they come back with future tenant signage, we can see that, okay, this is what they're limited to, is there is no allowance for further signage
And
in
it's
that.
partly it's on there because their elevations show signage that exceeds 101 square feet. When you look at the Dunkin', the Baskin Robbins, and their 2 boxes, you add up those square footages, it's over 101 square feet.
Okay.
So it's just making sure we're on record.
Okay, so that's good. I just want to make sure that the applicant is aware that us approving it with that in there does not prevent you from doing what you just presented with your sign. So that's
100% correct.
okay.
Tom, did you have something you want to say? Any more discussion? Phil or Justin, did you have discussion? No? Okay, then I think Mike's point is well taken. They can do what they want with the signage now, and it's up to a potential future tenant and the landlord, but he's on notice that the staff at this point is not interested in any future modifications. Right, okay. We'll call the roll.
Harry.
Aye.
Marshall.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Davy.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, we're on to item 5, which is specific implementation plan amendment for temporary construction signs at the same site. Are there any site inspections? Drive by and look at the weeds. The chair will accept staff report as part of the record. Go ahead, staff.
All right, so again, this is the same site. It also includes the future office site to the north. So the applicant is requesting an SIP to allow for a base standard modification to allow for 6-foot tall chain link fencing with their Ganther construction signage on it. And they do need that BSM as code does not allow signage to be affixed to fencing. And again, so it will just be temporary fencing during construction. It'll be along the Oshkosh Ave and Westfield frontages. So staff does not have concerns with this. We did something similar with the merge when they came through for their construction signage. So we are recommending approval of the SIP amendment with the condition that the construction, fencing, and signage may not be placed within the public right-of-way, and it will only be there temporarily and may only be displayed while the site is under construction.
Okay, technical questions? Seeing none. We'll open public comment. Any comment from the public?
Any public?
Seeing none. Back to the commission. We'll close the public comment. The applicant is not here.
Motion to adopt findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Perry,
Aye.
Marshall,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Davy,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Carries 8-0.
And
I make
is that
a
all,
motion
is
to
that our
adjourn.
only business?
So moved.
All right, I think we have a motion to adjourn and a second.
Who's the second? Just for a record, who seconded?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
We're going home.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried, okay.
Saying you've been here long enough today.
I was gonna say.